Hello everyone, my name is Joe Martins. I'm a solution architect in the Product and Solutions group here at FortiNet. And today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the changes in the fabric connector between FortiOS 6.4 and FortiClient EMS 6.4. Now this connector allows us to bring information from the endpoint into our network access control policies on the FortiGate in a seamless and easily managed manner. In this architecture, we use EMS to manage a host tagging feature. FortiClient collects a lot of information about the endpoint and the users on that endpoint that can be then used in generating tags that are passed to the FortiGate for network access control in the FortiGate policies. In version 6.4, the API and method for applying the tags in FortiOS have changed, so I wanted to walk through setting up and using the new connector. Certificates are required to set up a secure connection now between FortiOS and FortiClient EMS. There will be a certificate generated for EMS with a FortiClient license registration, and it'll be available for download. But in many cases, customers will want to use their own certificates generated by their own certificate authority. In most cases, you're going to find that you're going to use a private certificate authority, something that's free and easy to set up, such as Microsoft Certificate Authority or OpenSSL or even FortiAuthenticator. I've chosen to walk through generating certificates using a Microsoft CA simply because they're very prevalent in customer environments and are generally easy to set up and use. I'll show a shortcut that I found in a TechNet article a long time ago for configuring a web server template and then requesting a certificate based on that template. We'll be working with two types of certificates. We'll be exporting the private certificate authorities certificate, and that'll be used on the FortiGate. And then we'll also need to create and export a web server certificate for use on EMS. So the private certificate authorities certificate that we load on the FortiGate allows the FortiGate to trust the certificate that we're loading on EMS. Now, this is an Active Directory domain controller that I've set up to run Microsoft certificate services, and so it's a certificate authority. I've got a shortcut there on my desktop, but to find the actual applet, it's found under Administrative Tools. So I open that up, and then I take a look at the certificate authority itself here. And Microsoft has a fully featured certificate authority. And what we're going to do today is work with certificate templates. So we're going to choose to manage those. And what we're most concerned with is the web server certificate found at the bottom here. And what we're going to do is make a copy of it so that we can not do anything to the original template. So we're going to choose duplicate template. And then we're going to check a few things. We need to, under request handling, make sure that the private key is allowed to be exported. And then under cryptography, we want to make sure that the minimum key size is at least 2048. And then under security, we want to make sure that the machine that we're going to use to work with certificates has permissions to access the certificate authority and generate certificates. And that needs to be a computer account because a web server certificate is a computer certificate. And so I'm going to use the Windows machine that is also acting as my EMS server in order to request the certificates. And so I give the permissions here, and I'll need to give it read and enroll permissions. And once I've applied that, then I can rename this to a more meaningful name, and I just do that by change name here. It gives you a warning about if it's in use, you're going to be in trouble, so make sure and do this in the beginning. And once that's done, we can see that we've got it listed there. And then we can go ahead and close out of the templates console, the Manage Templates console. And then what we need to do is make sure that the certificate is issued. So we choose New Certificate to issue, and there it is. We see it listed there, and then choose OK. and then their certificate authority is now set to issue that EMS web server certificate that we have created. So next we're going to go ahead and close out of this console for now and move over to the EMS server. And on EMS, this is the Win 1901 machine that you saw that I gave permissions to access the certificate authority. And you'll note that under Windows Administrative Tools, there's no certificate management plugin there or snap-in. And so what we need to do is launch the Microsoft Management Console, or MMC, manually. And we can do that from the run line here. We just launch MMC, and then we're going to add in the certificate snap-in so that we can then begin managing certificates. Now, it's very important. We're going to want to choose computer account here because we need a computer certificate. And then the local computer is the one that's doing the managing, and then we choose OK. We click here in the personal certificate area, and there's nothing to see there yet because we haven't requested a certificate. But if we right-click, then that's going to allow us to choose all tasks and then request new certificate. And we can click next through here. We want to leave that on Active Directory enrollment policy. And then you can see a couple of certificates there. We want to choose the EMS web server certificate that we created, or we edited the template for a few minutes ago. And then we're going to need to configure the certificate for use. So we click here on the link for more information is required. And then I'm going to fill out a few things here. I'm going to need to fill out the subject name. And I'm going to use a common name. And the value I'm going to use here is the fully qualified domain name of the EMS server. Now this is going to have to match your DNS entry that you create in order for the certificate trust to remain in place. Now there's a lot of requirements out there now to have an alternative name in there when you're using a private CA. So I'm going to use DNS just to be easy and put that fully qualified domain name in there as well. And then I'm also going to use the IP address. I'm going to add that in because I may want to use that to access the EMS server securely. And if I don't have that in there then, and try to access it just by the IP address, then the trust would fail as well. So I'm going to check to make sure that the private key in my template, it is exportable because that's very important in the next step. And I'm going to choose to enroll. Once I hit finish here, you can see I've got a certificate and it's ready to be exported. So I'm going to right click there and I'm going to choose all tasks, and then I'm going to choose to export the certificate, and that brings up a wizard, and choose next. And then yes, I do want to export the private key. It's very important because it's necessary with the EMS server. And then this is all default. You can leave this alone. Choose next, and then I'm going to put in a password for the private key to secure it. Choose next, and then I'm going to give it a name. And just finish out the wizard here and choose OK. So why did we just export the certificate? We're on the EMS server. We have a certificate there in the Windows Certificate Store. Well, we've got an Apache server running in the background on the EMS server, and it doesn't recognize the Windows Certificate Store. So that's why we went through the exercise of exporting the certificate out. And then the second thing we're going to have to do here is get the certificate for the certificate authority. And so we'll find that under Trusted Root Certification Authorities. Our Microsoft certificate authority is listed under here. And we're going to choose to export that as well. Now this one is just a regular certificate export. So we're going to right click here and we're going to choose to export it. Just a second, there we go. Choose export, choose next. And then we want to choose base 64 encoded. That's what will be recognized when we go to upload this to the FortiGate. And I'm going to walk through the same thing, give it a name, something I'll recognize. usually like to put CA on it so that I'll remember that it's a CA certificate. And then choose Finish, and then we've got it there on the desktop next to the other certificate. So we're all done with the certificate management console, so we can close that. But there are some things that we need to do in EMS. So this is a fresh install of EMS, and we're going to open it up here just using the applet on the server. And we're going to want to go to System Settings and then Server here. We're going to want to use a fully qualified domain name, and this has to match the configuration that we used for the certificate. And you'll use this in a DNS entry so that FortiClients will be able to get to EMS no matter where it is to receive its configuration and its licensing information and all that. We'll make sure that remote HTTPS access is allowed so that we could manage EMS through a web browser. But then we've got to do a few things here with the SSL certificate. Now, you'll notice when we choose to upload, it wants a certificate and a private key. It wants those to be separated. Well, when we export our certificate, there was only one way to do it, which is to export a single certificate that's in a PFX file. So we're going to have to use some tools here on EMS to separate the key from the certificate. So we can minimize the EMS console now, and what we need to do is work with OpenSSL that we can find here on the EMS server under the FortiClient EMS directory. And under Apache and then bin, we'll find the OpenSSL executable. Now, I'm going to copy the directory here because it makes it easier for me to get there from a command line. So I'm just going to run the regular command line here and then change to that directory so that I can then use some OpenSSL options to separate the private key and the certificate out of that PFX file. So just to make it easy on myself, I'm going to copy the certificates over into the bin directory so I don't have a lot of paths in my commands that I'm going to do here. So I really just need to copy the PFX certificate over, but it's fine. I copied the CA in there as well. And then we're going to go back to the command line and do some things with OpenSSL. So these are the steps that we need to take to separate the private key and the certificate out of the PFX file. First, we'll separate out the private key. Then we'll run another command that allows us to decrypt that private key. We'll use the password there. And then the third thing we'll do is extract out the server certificate so that we have them separated so that we can then upload them to EMS. So back to the command line here, I'm going to type in the command to extract the private key from the PFX certificate. And one of the things I'll be prompted for here is that password that we set on that private key. So I go ahead and type that in, and then it's going to request that I type in a new passphrase. And I can use the same one or a different one. It doesn't matter, but it will require you to reset a passphrase on that as we're exporting that private key out. Now, as it is, the private key is encrypted. And before we attempt to upload it to EMS for use with the web server certificate, we're going to need to decrypt it. So we'll run a command here to do just that. And one of the things it'll ask for after I give it a name, it'll ask us for the password that we set a moment ago. And so after we hit enter here, we type in the passphrase, and then the file should be decrypted and ready to go for us. So now I have two different private key files here in this bin directory, and one is encrypted and the other is decrypted for use with EMS. I'm going to do a little cleanup work and delete the encrypted private key because I can't use it anyway. And this is really part of a cleanup process that I'll do when I'm finished. I'll remove those certificates that are here in the bin directory and the private key files, and I'll also go back and remove the permissions that this Windows 2019 server has to access the certificate authority directly, because I don't really need to do it anymore now that I've got my certificates. So the last thing we need to do here is separate the server certificate from the PFX file. I'll run a similar command that I use to export the private key, so I'll just use an up arrow to get that command back, and then I'll change the command to export the certificate, and I'll give that certificate a meaningful name. And then I'll be prompted again to use a password to have access to the PFX file, and then once I hit enter here, it'll export the certificate for me. And I can look quickly here in the directory to make sure both my files are there, and there they are. So I'm ready to upload those to EMS now. So I can go ahead and close out of my command window here, and I can minimize that Explorer window and go back into the EMS management console. And I'm going to go down to System Settings and then Server, and then scroll down a little bit and find the SSL certificate area. I'm choose to upload, and then I'm going to browse for my for the certificate first, and I need to go back into my Apache bin folder, and then I will scroll down here. Now there are a lot of files in here, so there is some cleanup for me to do. I'm going to want to move these files out of this directory because I don't want them to reside on my EMS server anymore. But for now, I'll just go ahead and choose the certificate.pem file and go ahead and upload that to EMS and choose open here, and that'll upload it. And then the second one I'll browse to is the of course the private key certificate. So I'll select that and choose open, and then I've got a test button here, and I'm looking for those 2 green check marks. And then I can choose Save, and now those certificates are loaded in EMS. Now, because we're loading these certificates, it will restart the Apache server, but then now we're ready to go with the certificate loaded. So now that we have the certificates loaded, I can do a quick check to test that they're working properly. I'm just going to open up a regular browser and browse to the EMS server using HTTPS. And then what I'll be looking for here is the fact that the EMS server has a valid certificate. And I'm going to go ahead and log in. Then I'm going to click the little lock button up there. And then I'm going to view the fact that the certificate is in fact valid. So now that I've got the certificates loaded and working properly on EMS, I want to go over to the FortiGate, and I want to upload the certificate authority certificate. And what this allows us to do, this allows the FortiGate to trust those certificates that we just loaded on EMS. We've got to make sure that the FortiGate is aware of the private certificate authority, and we do that by uploading the certificate authorities certificate. And we're going to do that over here on the FortiGate under System, and then certificates. Then we're going to choose to scroll down here to the bottom, and we're going to go ahead and upload that CA certificate that we exported earlier from our Microsoft CA. And we choose File, then choose to upload, and we grab the CA certificate, choose OK, and then it's loaded and it's ready for use here on our FortiGate. So now I'm ready to go ahead and configure the fabric connector. So I go to Security Fabric and then Fabric Connectors, create new, choose FortiClient EMS. I'm going to give it a descriptive name here, and then I'm going to use the fully qualified domain name. I like to do that rather than an IP address, so that in case the IP address of the EMS server changes, I can just use DNS. This error message is okay because we haven't authorized the EMS server yet. And we'll see that the connection is down, and we can refresh that. It's not going to do anything. And then we go back in, we see the message there that the FortiGate is not authorized. And it can't read the certificate because it's not authorized. And then we can't do anything to authorize it here. I click on the button just to make sure that an authorized message has been sent over to EMS. And I come back here and sign out of EMS, sign back in, and then I'm presented with the message that the FortiGate is waiting to be authorized. So I choose Authorize there, and then go back to the FortiGate, and then I want to click Authorize, and then I want to take a minute to review the certificate that's being loaded. I want to make sure it's the one that I chose, because this is a secure connection. It's saying that it's being trusted by the certificate authority, and then want to make sure that everything appears properly here. And I choose accept, and then we see that everything turns green, and I choose OK, and now we're up and running. So now the fabric connector is up on the FortiGate side, and we can review and see that we've got a green arrow. That means it's connected and working. On the EMS side, we can also take a look and see where it lists the FortiGates that are connected. So if we go to fabric devices, it's listed there, and then we can review the certificate that's coming over from the FortiGate, the trusted certificate. And then to set up tags, I'm going to go to compliance verification rule. I'm going to go ahead and click the add button to create a new rule set. And then I'm going to create a host tag that's looking for domain membership. So I'm going to give it that name, and then I'm going to go ahead and type in the name that I want to use to tag the endpoint. And this is the name that will be transferred over to the FortiGate as an address list. So when I'm creating a new one, I just type in the name and then hit enter, and it'll automatically create that as a tag. And then I'm going to add the rule. Now, if you look here, there are plenty of different types of rules. There's AD grouping and a lot of other things that we can use here under AD groups. But I'm going to choose to look at logged in domain, and then I'm going to give it my lab domain name here, which is ftntdemo.com, and I'm going to add that and save it. Then I'm going to go ahead and click Save again to save the rule set. And once that's done, in a few minutes as all the FortiClients check in, it'll begin to pass that tagging information over to EMS. And then I can go and verify that over here in the tag monitor. When I click here, I see that there's 3 machines there that are logged in to the Windows domain. And I can then, I can see information about when they logged in or when that was last checked, and I can hit refresh. And then I can go over to the FortiGate and see how that appears here. Now, because the tags are coming over as address lists, I'm going to go to Policy and Objects, Addresses. I'm going to, hit the plus arrow there. There's a lot of addresses, so I'm going to filter it by type. I'm going to look for the dynamic addresses, and you can see there's a description that says FortiClient tags. Now, there's some that are automatically created. All registered clients can be used as a tag and then used in a policy. So any clients that are registered to EMS would appear and automatically be generated inside of that host tag. And then you can see that we've got something for cloud servers if we're connected to EMS in the cloud. And then, of course, my new tag for domain membership appeared there with the IP addresses of the machines that are in that tag. Now as that list fills up, it'll probably get pretty long, and you probably wouldn't want to use the GUI to look at it. So there's command line options to look at all the machines that are being tagged in that particular group. So then the next thing to do is to add the address list and use it in a policy. So as we can see, if we go to a new policy and click on source, I can do a quick search, or I can find them right here. There's my EMS domain membership, and then I can use that in a policy to manipulate where on the network those members are allowed to go. And in this one, I'm just using the LAN interface and the WAN interface. But of course, in a complex network, you would have a lot of different interfaces and VLANs that you could use to segment the traffic. Just to summarize in closing, the EMS Fabric connector in FortiOS connects FortiGates and EMS servers together so that endpoint telemetry collected by FortiClient can be passed to EMS and then to the FortiGate for use in address lists. And on the FortiGate, obviously, those can be used in policies that can segment and protect the network in a variety of different ways. So we use the compliance verification lists in FortiClient EMS to do this, and we use tags that are configured to check a bunch of different information, and that can include domain membership, as we saw in the demonstration, antivirus checks, running processes, and many, many more. You can review those in the drop-downs in EMS or check out the administration guide for EMS on the document site. And just a further recap on the EMS Fabric Connector requirements. Communication between FortiOS and EMS does need to be secured by an SSL certificate. Now, there is a certificate that will be issued by Fortinet available to the customer when they register the FortiClient EMS licenses in the customer care portal. However, many customers are going to want to use their own certificate authority and certificates that they issue from it to secure this communication. The Microsoft CA demonstrated is just one method. There are many ways to work with certificates and certificate authorities. And finally, don't forget about the cleanup work I mentioned in the demonstration. Delete the certificate files from the desktop and the Apache bin directory, or move them to a secure location off of the Windows server that EMS is running on. Also, don't forget to remove the permissions allowed for the EMS server to directly access the Microsoft certificate authority. In real life, this would have been an administrator's workstation, and we would have done the certificate request, export, and further manipulation probably at that workstation, and then uploaded the resulting server certificate and private key to EMS from there. Thanks everybody for watching and listening. Hopefully you found this walkthrough helpful and now understand how to set up and use the new FortiClient EMS Fabric Connector found in FortiOS 6.4.